Hi, I'm Jody Dye, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. And whenever I have the opportunity to share my testimony, I get so excited. I really love sharing about what God has done for me. I'm going to start off by giving somewhat of a disclaimer because I do not want to dishonor my parents in any way. Spoiler alert, God healed my relationship with my parents. But what my parents did in the past is much a part of my story. My mom left home when I was 7. I have 3 younger siblings, and since I'm the oldest, I had to grow up real quick. I needed to help my dad with the younger ones because my dad had a hard time keeping babysitters. We would chase them away. I even hit one over the head with a broom and hid the phone. So finally, my dad had a lot on his plate raising 4 kids. Things got out of hand, and my dad needed relatives to step in and take us. We were all separated. I was the most troubled, so I got grandparents, but soon after, I ended up in a few different foster homes. I ran away a lot. I was just so angry inside, and I desperately wanted love, and all I felt was rejection. Years later, by the age of 12, I started hanging around with the wrong crowd, those bad boys. I started smoking and drinking, and that led to smoking pot and snorting cocaine. Yes, in middle school. I was in the 8th grade when I got caught selling cocaine in school. I was put in a rehabilitation hospital for about 8 months, and then they released me to my dad. But then I got into more trouble and I tried to commit suicide. I went back to the same hospital until I was placed in a children's group home. I stayed there until I became an emancipated minor. In the group home, I met a guy. He was rich, or his parents were rich. They bought me a car and they gave me $50 allowance that I would use to get high. And this boyfriend ended up cheating on me. So I took the car and I left. I ended up living in my car for maybe about 6 months or so. And then I met a man who told me everything I wanted to hear, and he sweet talked his way into the bedroom. We had 3 beautiful children together who I love, who I cherish deeply, and so glad that God gave them to me. However, me and their dad took a downward spiral the day we met. We both used drugs, and we were both physically and verbally abusive to each other. We split up many times. The first time we split up was after our first child because we were both unfaithful. He went with another woman who he had another child with, and I ended up with a guy who was the head of a gang called the Cobras. I seen and did some really bad things that I am not proud of. I was so young and naive, and this guy who I thought was my boyfriend was actually pimping me out to others in the gang. I was so high all the time that I hadn't even realized I was being trafficked. At this point in my life, I was about 20 years old. I was so desperate for love. All I got was abuse at every turn, but God. He came after me. He strategically set it up that I could know him. He sent a missionary to rescue me. This missionary came to the house that I was staying at and selling all my belongings. I was planning on going to New York with this so-called boyfriend who was jumping parole. As I was sitting there, the missionary asked me to go to church. And I was like, I ain't got time to go to church. You gonna buy something or not? He was like, oh, I'm just here to pick up Cuba for church. He had met Cuba the night before at the laundromat. So when Cuba came out, he was like, dude, come on, I don't want to go alone. So I went. I walked into this Baptist church and I felt so much love. I was scared at first because I had never felt that before. I wasn't church, so I had no idea that they would have an altar call at the end of the message. Something inside of me was so thirsty for this kind of love that I ran to the altar in the middle of the message and I asked Jesus to become my Lord and Savior. After praying, I had this conviction in my head of knowing what was right or wrong for the first time ever. And I heard, "Thou shalt not steal." And so I asked the missionary who took me to church if he could help me to take a freezer back to the landlord I had just stolen it from. Mm. September 1st, 1992, I was born again. Changes gradually began to happen. I was still getting high with my friends, but one day when we were getting high, I was reading my Bible and I began to say how this book was alive and it was speaking to me. And my friends thought I had lost my ever loving mind. They were like, "She is tripping." But it was transforming my mind and I started to think differently. One day I woke up and I told the girl who I was living with that I no longer wanted to watch her kids while she danced naked. I didn't understand then what was happening to me. It had never bothered me before. I even went to watch on occasion, but this time I felt like it was wrong. And I began to fall in love with Jesus. And my life literally started to change. My ex started to see the change and he started coming around again. But this time I was remaining pure. Long story shortened quite a bit. I went with him to Mexico. I was beaten badly by him for 4 months. I found a missionary and I ran to their home for refuge. They fasted and prayed for me, told me that he was like Jonah, and if I didn't throw him overboard, I would sink with him. So they put me on a bus, and I headed back to Michigan with nowhere to go in mind. But I had called my spiritual mother, and she suggested I visited this church. I went there, and a group of ladies from a woman's home were giving their testimonies. My daughter and I entered into the Hannah House of Detroit, a discipleship home, that very night. After graduating this year-long program, guess who shows up? Yep, him again. He sweet talked everyone into thinking that he was a changed man, except for the director of the woman's home. She said, "Jody, don't do it. He is a wolf in sheep's clothing." I was like, "But Jackie, you don't understand. He's like the father of my child." So, not heeding the many warnings that she gave me, I married him. And 1 week after our marriage, he physically beat me again. He started using again, or he never stopped, and he just had everyone fooled. We had another child, and for years as a Christian wife, I was afraid to say anything and always thought this was what I was worth. He would always say, "No one would ever love a woman like me," and I believed it. Then I got pregnant with our third child, and this time he was never home. He was with a mistress that he had a long time affair of 2 years with. He was with her when I was giving birth. Our son was born with a rare heart condition, and the doctor only gave him a 50-50 chance of making it. After his heart surgery, we had to keep him isolated for 6 months. After 6 months of isolation and in lots of prayer over this child and in this marriage, God gave me the courage to kick him out of the house, and he didn't put up a fight either because God was rescuing me. He left with his mistress out of state, and he was gone. On 7/7/7, at Lou Engel's event called The Call, a spiritual division took place, and we were divorced painlessly. I was free, however. I was now homeless with 3 kids. A wonderful Christian family took us in. I was in school and living off of church donations, but I graduated with honors and became a computer programmer. Then one day a friend invited me on a retreat, and I so needed it. But I had no idea what kind of retreat it was except for the name, God's Unfailing Love. And it was co-ed. The men of this ministry loved Jesus so much that I began to ask God to give me one of them, please. I started to get close to one in particular. We were two peas in a pod, and we loved each other with such pure love. But God said no. He said to me, you can settle for Ishmael, but I have an Isaac for you. You can settle for my permissible will, but I have my perfect will in mind. When God closed the door on that relationship, my heart was so incredibly broken. I remember crying in my friend's arms for hours. But God was telling me he was not the one. After fighting God for what seemed like the whole night of tears, he spoke gently to me and said, I want you to remain unavailable for one whole year to any dating relationships. And I want you to prepare for me like Esther prepared for her king. I opened up the book of Esther in the Bible to see how she prepared. She prepared with beauty treatments and special food for 12 months. He said to me, keep a journal, and he was going to be my special food, my manna, as he called on me to fast from food every other day for the entire year. He became my portion, and I hungered and thirsted for him alone. So I left my social life. I stepped down from ministry. I told my pastor about what the Lord was showing me and that I wanted to serve, but I felt like God was saying, not with people. So the pastor assigned me the task to clean the toilets for a whole year after every service. And they had 3 services, but I did it joyfully for my king. I got to know Jesus so intimately that year. He gave me beauty treatments for the heart. He gave me spiritual vision, and he helped me to turn these beauty treatments for the heart into a book and then onto women's retreats and conferences. After my year of consecration or separation with the king, my heart longed again for a man. However, after being loved on by Jesus the way he loved on me, I was not going to settle. The janitors who I had worked with through the year had plotted to set me up with one of the janitor's son. He said, I want that girl for my son. So we gave him my number to call me, and he called, and we met at church. It was a nice visit. As he walked me out to the car, I said to him, I'm an old-fashioned girl, so if you're looking for me to hand anything out, don't bother calling. He got into his car and he praised God because that is exactly what he was looking for. And he began to pursue me like Christ pursued me. He lays his life down for me just like Christ lays his down for me. He is the Isaac God promised to me if I would just wait. He asked me to marry him, and we waited to have sex until we got married on 10-10-10. He is my earthly king. Let me introduce you to my earthly king, Sir William Thatcher Dye.
Oh, geez, I gotta come in here. Hello.
my Sir William Thatcher Dye. I love and respect him dearly. God first quenched my thirst with his love, and then he sent me someone who would love me just as he loves me. There's so much power in the wait. What do you say?
I say it's awesome.
He's such a good man. I love him,
I,
honey. That's my babe. After years of being married to such a man, God has brought so much healing in my heart and my life. I know that what he has done for me, he has done also for you. The beauty treatments and special food that I teach are the ones that God used to prepare not only me for him, but also for you so that you can be ready and prepared for him when he returns. Or if the Lord should tarry, you will be ready for the day you will meet him. Are you irritated? Are you dry, insecure? Are you hiding? The beauty treatments will reveal the truth and moisturize your life. Are you hungry and thirsty for more? Then special food will satisfy. If you're looking for God to fill your cup, all he needs is an empty vessel. How empty are you? Have you seen this world has nothing to offer you? And are you ready to be filled with nothing but the best? Then you're in the right place. Stay thirsty, my sister queens. The best is yet to come for such a time as this.